And today we are going to speak about a particular subject extremely important for dance sport. This subject is, we can say, the importance of the technique in the absolute judgment. So we are going to explain what is our new tool for judging competition in WDSF, which is the absolute judgment, in connection with the technique. Practically the majority of the criteria that you find in the technical part, in the absolute judgment, are directly connected with the technique. The majority, practically nearly all. And this is extremely important to explain, because without the technical knowledge it's not possible to describe, understand, and also use the absolute judgment. What is the main element of the absolute judgment? Absolute judgment have a definition. This definition is not described into the manual of the of the system 3.0, 2.1. Doesn't matter the number, but in the judging criteria manual. But this is exactly what we consider like absolute judgment. So the absolute judgment is a method for judging a couple of athletes based on a comparison. So you compare, okay, the couple into the floor with the dance sport ideal model. When we speak about the dance sport ideal model, we consider an ideal performance. This ideal performance is created, the ideal performance of each dancer, created by the rules dictated by the dance sport technique. So it's like this: you have another couple into the floor, an ideal couple into the floor, to which you compare all the other couples that are dancing the competition. This ideal couple is an ideal couple that you have created thinking about the rules of the technique. Say, okay, the rules of the technique say that the foot must be like this, the leg must be like this, the position must be like this. So with all these rules, you imagine this ideal couple, this ideal performer, and you compare the couple into the floor with this ideal one. So now we have to consider the absolute judging and its structure. The structure of absolute judging is contained in the manual of the absolute judging system. This manual is something that you have from the WSF. WSF is giving you these criteria over this manual, but it's very important to understand which are the most fundamental elements included in these manuals. The fundamental elements are four. We have four points that each judge, when they study the AJS, the absolute judging system, have to consider in order to understand this system. Which are these elements? We have the first element, which is the judging component, the four-phase most judging component that become now extremely popular: technical quality, movement to the music, partner skill, and choreographic presentation. Inside each component, we have the sub-components. So for each one of these four elements, we have other elements that describe even more in detail the main components. For example, we have 12 subcomponents for the technical quality and 3 for the movement to the music, and so on. Other important thing, extremely important, because that is the famous link between the judging criteria, the absolute judging system, and the technique. The definition of the subcomponent. This is extremely important. Study the definition, and that will be the work that we will do today. You understand the connection with the technique. The last important point are the quality index they call IQs. The IQs are the division, is the level of performance. So is the element to identify the level of where the score is 10, like that famous, just described, ideal model. So, when I speak about level with score 10, all the IQs, all the quality index that you find in this level are automatic the ideal model. And this is absolutely something that you have to consider when you study the structure. So, now we are going to the various points of the structure to understand how they are, which are the definition of it, which are the meaning of these points. The first point, the first description is about, of course, the main fundamental components. Without knowing the logic of these components, you don't understand what you are going to judge. As I said, the 4 components: technical quality, movement to the music, partner skill, choreography, presentation. This is something that you don't find in the manual. This is the description of what does it mean these 4 components. Technical quality, I read it is the evaluation of that part of performance that concerns the fundamental principle of the technique. So this is something connected really with the technical idea. What of the technique? This fundamental principle, all technical rules that regulate the coordination of the movement. So, how to use the leg, how to position the foot, how to use the body. All these elements, fundamental elements, are considered in this evaluation. Then we have the other part regarding the music, movement to the music. The definition that I prepared for you is the evaluation. Moving to the music is the evaluation of that part of the performance that concern the rules that the dancer must respect when synchronizing. So synchronizing is the key word. His movement with the music played. So, what I have to respect as a rule, because he's always respecting a rule, when I synchronize my movement with the music. This is the evaluation that is done in the movement of the music. Partner skill is also an evaluation of the part of the performance that concerns, in this case, the ability of the dancer to be, again, well synchronized in the couple, in their movements, and where the ability of the lead and follow is best expressed. So, now we are going to open a new concept, which is the ability of the couple to be synchronized, but also to have to show the ability of lead and follow. Also, in this case, respecting the technical rules. There is technical rules also for the partner skill. The last point, choreography presentation, is the evaluation of. This is particular because it's considering what is the ability to prepare the competition, the tactical skill of the couple in presenting themselves at their best on the floor. So, how they manage the ability to stay on the floor, to enter to the floor, to all the part also to look good into the floor, and also the evaluation, that is another thing, of the choreography. So, understanding which are the elements to understand if the choreography was built up in the good way possible. Now, the next point is to understand the judging subcomponent. The judging subcomponent is the element that are inside the components, the 4 elements that I said before. Here there is a list. You can see for standard and Latin how many subcomponents there is for each component. Technical quality have standard and Latin 12 subcomponents, so quite rich. Movement to the music, standard and Latin 3 subcomponents. Partner and skill 4 and 5 subcomponents, and choreography presentation 6 subcomponents for standard and also Latin. Each component considers its ideal performance, built on the basis of the various elements that compose it. What does it mean then? In practical terms, the couple receive a specific evaluation. For example, we consider the technical quality performance obtained, and that is important. So if you consider the components, say, which is the final mark? The final mark is the sum of the evaluation of each individual subcomponent. So if I have 12 components, I have to consider for each of these 12 components an ideal match. Then I have to do the sum and then the average, and I find out the final marks for the main components. So technical quality have to sum together 12 marks before finding the main mark for the technical quality. I have to be honest, despite the fact that it's a very good guideline, rich of the information, this idea of the subcomponents, very often become extremely difficult, for question of time, of course, to make an evaluation of the subcomponents, then sum together, and then find out the final mark. It's extremely complicated. So, especially, for example, technical quality, 12 subcomponents, we are speaking about a lot of elements to sum together, to analyze. What the judges tend to do, they have two choices. The first choice is to decide to consider the main subcomponent, over 12, maybe 2 or 3. Or, if the judge is very, very expert, he has these components already in mind, easy, and he has in his mind already the ideal couple, the ideal performance. So he has the ideal performance in his mind, so he saw another couple created by these subcomponents. And he compared this ideal couple, like I said before, with the real one that is in the floor. Of course, this ideal couple have no errors, the real one have some errors. The comparison between the errors of the real couple and the no error of the ideal one create the ranking, the ideal marks. Of course, this requires a lot of experience, so it's not super easy. Okay, so now the next element that we have to consider is what I said, the definition of the subcomponents. Definition of the subcomponent is extremely important to understand the ideal performance. We can say within the definition of subcomponents, there are inside the definition keywords that quickly remember the technical elements that the subcomponents contains. We make an example. This example is about the food skill. If you go in the judging manual, judging parameters manual, you will find before all the quality index, you find the description, the definition of this element, of this subcomponent, which is inside the technical quality section. The description is, for the food skill, the way in which the feet are both moved and placed on the floor, and the alignment and shaping of the feet and ankles. So here we have practically 4 keywords. The first keyword is way in which the feet are moved. What is the connection with the technique? As I explained in this slide, the connection with the technique is the foot placement rule. So if you want to understand what does it mean that, study in advance technically the foot placement rule. Second keyword, the way in which the feet are placed. Again, which is the connection for the technique. For understanding the keywords, you have to know foot placement and foot action rules. At the end is always the same subject, but if you know in advance which are the rules, more easy to understand what is the definition. Then, alignment, feet and ankles. Also in this case, the technique describes this logic in the foot placement and the foot action rules. The same logic, foot placement and foot action rules, are findable in the last keyword, which is shaping, feet and ankles. So these 4 keywords are all easily described understand if you have in advance a background of knowledge regarding the technique and the rules of the technique. So now we are going to describe, we speak about in this example about the foot placement rules and foot action rules. What is in the technique? I give you now the definition for the technique. So now we are going the word of the technique. The technique say for the foot placement, so we are in this example of the foot skill. For the foot placement and foot action, the technique say foot placement is the description of where the foot is placed and at the beginning and at the end of each step in relation to the other foot. I make an example. The foot is going forward, the right foot is going forward because it's going forward in relation to the left foot. So that is the main definition. It's going forward with a certain particular attitude, so it's going forward in CVMP. So, going forward in CVMP is what we consider foot placement. This is the definition for this particular step in terms of foot placement. Foot action is similar, connected, but speak about another logic. It describes which part of the foot is in contact with the floor, with or without weight, during the execution of the step, and also how it is placed on the floor. So, which part is touching the floor, can be the heel, can be the ball, can be anything, okay? So, the definition, which part is the foot action. But not only that, there is also other elements inside of the foot action. How you coordinate this contact with the body weight, how you coordinate this contact with the action used. So it's a very complex area of description, but this is the main idea regarding these two technical elements. So now we analyze all that famous keywords for this example of foot skill, and we analyze the connection with the technique. The first keyword, if you remember, was the way in which the feet are moved, connected with the foot placement. Foot placement, we have to understand, in this case, if I move, I have to understand these technical elements. Technical elements are quite simple, but sometimes it's difficult to remember because inside these simple words there is a huge range of technical information. For standard Latin, the things are more or less the same. Here we have one element more and here one less, but the idea is mostly the same. So, which are the elements in terms of foot placement when we consider a movement of the foot? The foot can move forward, and forward doesn't mean forward generally, forward with specific rule, backward, to side, diagonally forward, diagonally backward, forward slightly to side, backward slightly to side, across the body, and forward or backward in CVMP. So, I make an example. If I have to go forward, means really that my foot move in a clear track forward in relation to the other. Which are the idea that we have to consider to understand if the execution is done in the proper way. In standard and also Latin, there is a biomechanical, technical idea that must be respected. And I'm speaking about this. In standard Latin, the movement of the foot, particularly when we speak about transfer weight, when I go from one foot to another, okay, have to respect, must happen with the use of the technical, biomechanical principle. So this is not just technique, it's something also scientifically proved, of the center balance. So what does it mean this? It means that if I want to go from this foot to this foot, I cannot technically, if it's not stated like that, I cannot technically jump on the foot. I have to transfer the weight, passing from this intermediate position where the weight is divided, called center balance, and then finish the transfer weight. So you cannot do technically the execution without considering that. This is something that in the performance is not visible. You don't see the couple that stop in center balance and continues, but you see the quality of the execution. The couple that jump from foot to foot tend to be always in a trouble in terms of balance, in terms of stiffness and whatever. When the couple use this type of technical biomechanical principle, you see a coordination, a quality, a stability, a softness that is absolutely in top level. So now we take the second keyword, the way in which the feet are placed. You remember that we said that for understanding these keywords we had to know what does mean foot action and what does mean foot placement. So we go to the foot action, that one that we didn't mention before. Foot action, we said, that is how you place, how you touch the floor with the part of the foot. Here there is indicated all the possible part of the foot. Standard Latin practically is more or less the same. We have, with or without weight, of course, for both cases, the possibility to do a heel, a toe, a ball. All foot, flat foot, that practically are the same thing, but depend how to reach this position. The extreme toe. Then there is the inside edge of toe, of ball, of foot, or even extreme toe. And the outside edge, in this case, just the toe or extreme toe. As you can see, in the Latin is the same stuff. I go to show you these various connections. So we have the heel, means that I touch as a first connection with the floor when I take the step, the heel. And it's not like this, but it's always with a particular coordination. Secondly, the toe. The toe means that I go in that contact that is at the maximum height still with weight. Then ball, which is anything under the toe. Since the foot are going down into the floor. The whole foot and the flat foot, that is the same thing, because in both cases you have the foot on the floor, all the foot on the floor. But if you go in a direct movement, like happening in tango, this is all foot. If you go in a rolling movement, like this, in this case is flat foot. Inside edge is very obvious. You have inside edge that can be all the foot, the ball, the toe, even the extreme toe. So especially when you do line, the extreme toe is very often used. And this is the simple, we can say, idea regarding how to touch the floor, with or without weight, like I said. But this, the most important thing that is giving the real quality to the execution is about the foot placement connected to the foot action. In fact, to obtain this foot placement, it is important to position the foot following the coordination recommended by the technique. So as I said before, I cannot do the heel. I have to do the heel. So it's a different logic, and the technique describes this. And there is some rules. The rules in standard, for example, are the use of the foot roll. That means coordinate. Foot rolls is very often, very clearly described when you collect the foot. So you do a heel, and to go to the flat foot or to the toe, you use the body weight. But this idea of coordination between body weight and foot action can be considered everywhere. Also when you open the step. So it's always a sort of foot roll. And very important, is extremely important in the standard, but also in Latin, avoiding the unconventional foot lift. That is written very clearly in capital letter everywhere. So you cannot do a step, at least if it's not stated like that, lifting and placing. This is something that cannot be done technically because it's a lack of quality in terms of foot skill. In the Latin, it's practically the same. It's not indicated the foot roll, even if I can say that there is the sense of coordination between body and foot, so also sort of foot roll in Latin, but what is important here, you can read it very clearly, no unconventional foot lift. You want to do Rumba, you have to do Rumba feeling the floor. You cannot do Rumba lifting and placing. That is the understanding of the keywords described in this element. So now we take the second keyword, not the third keyword, alignment, feet and ankles. What does it mean this? I want to underline that in the technique always involves coordination that favors a clean and harmonious aesthetic of legs and feet. So one of the main targets, especially today, is to have a nice coordination, to have a very quality transfer weight, but also to have an aesthetic in the coordination. The aesthetic is extremely important because you cannot have beautiful makeup, you cannot have fantastic dress, and then the feet and leg are not aesthetically right. So in standard and Latin there is various ideas regarding that. We can say that the most important rule concerning the alignment for this subject is the parallelism of the feet. This rule requires that there is always, unless stated in a different way on the book, for example a pointing step, there is always a constant alignment between two elements, between the two feet. So the feet should be always in this sense of parallelism, even if they move forward, okay? And between the knee, the ankle, and the toe of each leg. So also the alignment is the knee, the ankle, and the toe. So dancing with the attitude like that is technically wrong because aesthetically produces a very unclean line. So this is something that must be considered when you evaluate, in terms of foot skill, the alignment of feet and ankles. If we consider Latin, also in this case, there is aesthetic rules. You can find many rules. The one very common, especially in samba, cha-cha, and rumba, is the rule of the coordinated rotation of the back toe. So when you take a step in these three dances, the back toe are creating this coordinated rotation outwards. In fact, the sentence says, what does it mean coordinated rotation? An outward rotation of the toe of the back foot. This is important. Well coordinated with the weight transfer from the center balance to the recovery phase. So from the center balance to the recovery phase, I coordinate the body weight together with this action of the toe. And this is absolutely important for the quality of the execution. So now we are going with the fourth keyword. The four keywords, as you remember, for the foot skill, shaping feet and ankle. What does it mean, shaping feet and ankle? Again, it's a question of aesthetic. Clean and harmonious aesthetic is something that technique consider also for these keywords. So in standard, what does it mean? The shaping, in terms of aesthetic, means practically that you have to respect two ideas. The toes, especially when you close the step, the toes must be always on the same line. So you should have the toe that always create this alignment between them. It cannot be something like this, at least if it's not stated differently. And second thing, the instep, so this part of the step, this is my hand, but imagine is the step, should be in this, if it's not stated differently, should be in the same level. Cannot be things like that. So if I close in the natural turn, I close with the toe like this, or I close with the instep like this. Technically, if it's not stated differently, you created a mistake in terms of shaping. there is, of course, exemption, and the exemption are in the tango and Viennese waltz. I think many of you know that when you close in tango, you have to produce this position. So in this case, the two are not aligned, but it's written in the technique. In Viennese waltz also, when you do the closing, you have this position. So the instep is not in the same level, but it's also written in the technique. So if it is written, you can go out from this rule. But if it's not written, that is important to remember. In the Latin, if you remember what I said before regarding the extension, the rule says that you must create an unbroken line between the toe, the ankle, and the rest of the leg. So something like this is considered, in terms of shaping, aesthetically not right. So this is something that is important to look for when you do an evaluation in terms of shaping. Okay. Now we are going to describe this element, which is the judging of the quality. So we go out from the subcomponent. We start to speak about the quality index, what the manual describes as indicative qualities, IQs. We consider standard. What are the quality index? The quality index are the guidelines, or even better, the model, okay, for each level of performance. So there is in the manual 3 possible levels of performance: score 6, score 8, score 10. 10, remember the ideal model. For each subcomponent, we make an example. If we consider choreography presentation and the subcomponent structure and composition, which is part of this choreography presentation, we have to start, as we did before, from the structure, from the definition of the subcomponent structure and composition. And we have to start to consider, from this definition, we start to evaluate, we start to consider the 3 levels of performance. So actually you have to remember what the subcomponent, after the definition, that give already the guideline, you have to remember what the quality index say for the score 6, for the score 8, for the score 10. This is, in the reality, the extremely difficult part of the judgment, because remember all these sentences are quite easy, even if there is inside keywords and whatever, but it's quite easy. These 3 levels of quality index are well described. However, my suggestion is that you have a clear idea of one of the score. Again, the main one, the 10 score, because when you have the 10 score in mind, you find automatically the ideal performance. From that score, you go down and you find out if there is mistake. You say, I have in mind the 10.0, okay? I see, when I watch the couple, I see difference in terms of mistake. There is more mistake in relation to this ideal 10.0, and automatically you find out the marks for the couple that there is in the. That is my way that I suggest to you. So it's not necessary to remember all the scoring. Remember the 10.0 because it's the ideal model. Mistake, and automatically you create your extra, the other type of score. So that is the point regarding this. Okay, now as we did before, we make the analysis, because now we are going to see how to judge also the quality index. But before the quality index, we have to understand the definition of these subcomponents, structure and composition. The definition that you can see on this column say the composition of the structure and composition means the composition of the dance, the time, the use of space, and the varying degrees of difficulties within a dance. Again, we have 4 keywords. The composition of dance figure means which type of dance figure are involved in the composition. So you have to know which are the figures that the couple use in the composition, in the choreography, and how they are combined together. So they have to see how they combine. You have to understand the structure the type of figure and how this figure were structured to them. Other important thing is the time. Which type of time are involved in the composition, basic and or complex? The use of space, how the composition is arranged on the space of the floor. So how they put on the floor the various figures when they create the choreography. In this case, it's very important the rules of lines and spots that after I will describe. And also, this is also important, the varying degree of difficulties within the dance. What does it mean? How the composition is structured in relation to the various level of difficulties of the figures. So, are they use just low degrees figures, or they use a balanced mix between simple and complex? So this is very important to know, also to create an evaluation. If the figure is very complex and they execute well, or the figure is very simple and they execute also well, automatically understand that there is a difference in terms of quality based on the difficulties. So now we are going to continue the analysis of the definition, and we go in the various keywords. So the first keyword is the composition of the dance figure. What does it mean then? It means practically that inside the composition of the dance figure should be a series of elements included to have a various composition. So first of all, must be inside the composition rotation figures and movements. That means that you must have in the composition pivot, spins, static turns. That is to create a various combination. So this is required to be in the content. Also, linear movements is required. What does it mean linear movement? Progressive turns, so the turn that produce movement progression. Then, of course, forward and backward or side movements. Then, lines. The lines are the extensions or the static line. That it must be included in the choreography. If is required, so for example, if you do quick-step or you do tango, it's possible to have also the hops and jumps for quick-step, meaning step up and polka chasse, or tipsy, or also running with jumps. This is also required. Not to be abused. I mean, if you have a choreography and you are in top level and you use only that, means that your choreography is a poor choreography. So I understand the strategy when you are in a low level class to use the jumps because create dynamic and whatever. But in top level, you have to mix all the elements. So also the smooth movement must be considered. Sudden movement in tango, specific for tango, not for both, like link, lunge, check, and all the lines that create a sudden change of speed. Every time you create sudden change of speed, is considered like sudden movement, and is important for the characterization of the choreography in tango. The next element is for the structural composition content, okay, is the idea of the timing. Timing is also important. In the choreography, in the composition, is required to have various types of timing. Basic timing, of course, complex timing, syncopated timing, and also a timing which respects the phrasing. In fact, for basic timing, we consider all the timing that have the basic beat for each bar, that consider the basic beat for each bar. For example, in waltz, a timing 1, 2, 3 is a timing that have is considered simple because use only the 3 beats for each bar. So this is considered basic time. Complex time is the one that have a particular condition. The typical example of complex time is the one in Viennese waltz when you do the offbeat. You do a continuous spin, you have 2 steps, but 3 beats. So the beat intermediate, number 2, is shared between the front and the back step. So 1, 2, 3. So these 2 is melt between the 2 steps. In this case, we are not speaking about basic timing, but we speak about a complex time. Also, when you make a line very long, is considered complex timing, something that you have to show. In the case of beat, of course, you show mainly in the tennis words. Syncopated timing, this is also required. The timing that you use when you have a higher number of steps in relation of the beat available. In this case, you use the syncopation. In a high-level competitor class, is required also to use syncopated. Not only syncopated, because you have to mix always between the time. So basic, syncopated, complex when it's possible, but not only syncopated, not only basic. It's important also in the sense of the time in the phrasing. Phrasing, what does it mean? It means that you respect what the music says in terms of structure. The music have a particular structure, you have bars, beat, but also phrase, but also chorus, but also introduction. All these things must be shown in the choreography. And the phrasing also, using technique, choreographic timing or phrase timing, helps the respect of the phrase, but also the structure of the music in terms also of rhythm, accent. If you respect the phrases, you respect also the accent. It's automatic, these things, because it's all inside the structure. That is what about the timing. So if you have a knowledge regarding the timing, technical idea of the timing, it's possible to understand if the couple is doing correct or not. Then the next keyword is about the use of the space. Here there is a classical example in standard how to use the space, but also in progressive dances in Latin you can consider more or less the same, but mainly that is for standard. The rules of the spot and line say that you must respect this particular movement pattern on the floor in terms of movement and in terms of line, and on specific spots you have to do something like line, like change of direction, because this is the typical, the most efficient way to show a choreography in the floor. So if you go around the floor, you have to go around normally following the structure. If you don't follow the structure and you do things like this, you cut the floor or you go diagonally like this, this is absolutely against the way used by the majority of the couple along the years. So this is what does it mean use of space in choreography and presentation, structure and composition. Now the next point for structure and composition, the next keyword with the last one is degree of difficulties. This you need really a lot of experience to understand that, because first of all you have to understand which type of movement there is in the choreography. Type of movement are basic movement, advanced variation, highly complex movement, lines and skill figure. About this, it's important to know also which is the level of difficulties of each one of these ones. So you can have basic movement that are difficult, basic movement that are more easy. So the knowledge regarding that is quite important, because it gives you the possibility to understand, are they using high degrees figures or low degrees figures, which one they are using more, and therefore automatically you can decide which is choreographically the one that must be prized or not prized. So having an idea about all these type of movements is extremely important. Having an idea about which one is more complex is also important. How to understand if a movement is more difficult than the other. This is my indication. The level of difficulties depends on technical complexity. So technique is also important to understand. You use more particular couple position, particular foot action, particular leg action. So, and with that you understand if it is difficult or not. But also how much complex in terms of coordination. There is in terms of coordination are really involved in this figure or less involved. So if you know how much complex is that, you can understand which is the difficulties of the figure. But also, that is also important, especially in dance sport, the conditional physical complexity. So physically, this type of movement involves a lot the couple or involve a little bit. So that is also something that you have to consider for the evaluation of this type of part. Of course, when I say involve a lot, doesn't mean that I have to do things that is not exist in dancing to make complex. So I push on the floor like this, and I have done a complex figure. No, that is nothing to do with dancing. So something that has to do with dancing, of course, and you have to understand which one is more complex in terms of physics, in terms of conditional capability. And that's it. That is the last point to analyze the structure and composition. As you can see, there is a lot to study, there is a lot of experience. You must really be involved in this information to be sure to create a correct evaluation. We make an example also for Latin. For Latin, we take in this case the component technical quality and we consider the subcomponent isolation coordination, extremely important for the body action. Again, we analyze the definition of this isolation and coordination. The definition says, is the capability of each dancer to produce isolated action in different areas of the body without creating distortion in other areas. Combine them in a coordinated movement. So, it's clear that the body action are the point that you have to consider. So, creating isolation means that you create body action. Okay? I make an example just to show you. I create isolation, but I create also body action. What is important? This is, they said, you can do movement in the body, but attention, without creating distortion in other areas. I can do a translation, but that doesn't mean that to do a translation I create a distortion. So it must be something that still maintains aesthetically the correct look. The last point, everything must be combined together in a coordinated manner. So when I do this movement, it must be something that look natural. So, okay, I use the hip and I use the body together, but this must be something that creates a sense, a synchronization, not separate or in the wrong moment or with the wrong attitude. So this is something that must be read deeply. So your keywords explain clearly what you have to do as a dancer to produce isolation coordination the correct way. And reading the definition is already a good start to understand how to evaluate that. For sure, the definition can solve a lot of things from the beginning right away. Now, we don't do what we have done before with the structure and composition. We try to do something more simple. We go directly in the technical idea that let you understand the definition. The technical idea is obviously the body action, but also the hip action, we can say. I describe the body action because it's one of the parts that more is connected with this isolation and coordination. When we speak about body action, we speak about an image that we have of the body of the dancer, that he divides his upper part of the body in three areas, the red, the green, and the blue. So this area that go from the shoulder area, we can say, the torso, so the breast, we can say, area, the green one, and the lower torso area. All these three elements are working together, are isolated together to create particular action. If you work, for example, with the green area and the shoulder area in relation to the red area, you can create the translation. I make an example. But also sometimes working with the green area in relation to the shoulder and the lower torso, a particular high-level translation. So all these things are always synchronized together thanks to the image that we consider here. If we go to analyze which possible body action can happen, these are the list. We have the squeeze, the rotation, the translation, inclination and sway, extension and flexion, and contraction. I go rapidly to explain, because like this you have an idea. When we do a squeeze, we do an action where both shoulders are going down, and one hip is reaching one of the shoulders, creating a sort of, shortening of the area connecting with the hip. This is considered squeeze. So both shoulder, but the hip connect with one shoulder. Can be done on the right, on the left. Then rotation very easy. The shoulder and the breast are changing in relation of the hip. That is very useful to introduce turns, for example, to make the movement more soft. Translation I already explained before. This area in relation to the top area displays, the top area displays in relation to the lower area. Inclination on the frontal plane, you have the change that can involve also sometimes the lower part, this mostly in standard, but in Latin the top part only, so the green area, we can say the green and the blue area in relation to the red one. Extension and flexion, this time is on the sagittal plane, you have the flexion going forward and the extension going backward, okay? And this, that is a particular action very common for jive, contraction, where you have, how to say, this part of the body that gets shorter, and create, also with the coordination of the jump, this attitude, where I shorten in this, I make this more long, in the same moment I also breathe, and they produce something that is very comfortable for the jumping in jive. So the contraction is a particular action, unique action, very useful for the coordination of jumping jive. And with this, we conclude our description. I hope it was useful for you, and I hope I give you already an introduction, we can say, to what is the judging criteria and the technique connected to that. Hope that this can be useful, hope that you can have an inspiration, and I hope all the best for your career as a teacher and also as a judge.